Hello there, my name is Stephen Pitt. Just a disclaimer before the start of the video, the WWF changed its name to WWE in 2002 after a lawsuit from the World Wildlife Fund, so I'll be using WWF and WWE interchangeably throughout the video, depending on the time period I'm discussing. There are many professional wrestlers that have appeared in movie roles throughout the years to varying degrees of success. But the three most successful pro wrestlers to transition into acting are Dave Bautista, John Cena, and of course, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. But I'll be focusing more on the path Cena and The Rock took into Hollywood stardom. You see, though Bautista was a big name during his time as a wrestler, he wasn't a massive star to the degree Cena and The Rock were, to the point where his wrestling career had almost no bearing on his Hollywood stardom. In fact, a lot of people often need reminding that he was a wrestler before his acting career. That's not the case with Rock and Cena. Rock was a big star for the then WWF during their boom period of the late 90s, early 2000s, and a pop culture icon. He was in music videos, he hosted Saturday Night Live, and spoke at the 2000 Republican Convention. And that was before he even appeared in a movie. And Cena was the WWE's top star between 2005 and 2015. He was the ambassador for WWE and pro wrestling in general during this period, appearing on talk shows, hosting Kids' Choice Award shows. He even had a rap album that made it to number 15 in the Billboard Top 200. So it would seem obvious that these two could transition into being Hollywood A-listers, given the fame they had just from their wrestling careers. But why wasn't this the case for other wrestlers? When you ask a person who's not into wrestling to name a wrestler, if they're a British person over the age of 60, they'll usually say Big Daddy or Giant Haystacks. But for everyone else, the name Hulk Hogan usually comes up a lot. He was arguably the biggest star in the history of wrestling. He was a household name during the WWF's boom period of the 1980s. How come he didn't go on to have a movie career like that of Rock, Cena or Bautista? With Hogan's recent passing in July of this year, I thought I'd look into it. First, let's go back through the history of wrestling, as this is something that's been popular in the United States pretty much since the days movies became popular. So how come it's only in recent years we've seen wrestlers successfully transition into becoming Hollywood leading men? Up until the 1980s, wrestling in the United States operated in a territory-based system. You had regional wrestling companies that would only hold events and air their TV shows within their own regions, so the top stars of these territories were only famous on a local level. There were only two nationally known wrestlers around this time. One was Andre the Giant, who travelled between the territories as a special attraction, though his gargantuan size and thick French accent limited his potential as a leading man. He made appearances as Bigfoot in an episode of The $6 Million Man, and as the giant Fezzik in The Princess Bride.
So what happens now?
We face each other as God intended. Sportsmanlike. No tricks, no weapons. Skill against skill alone.
The other would have been the NWA champion, whose job it was to tour around the territories and wrestle the promotion's top stars. But the manic schedule of wrestling 200 plus days a year and constant travel would have made a movie career impossible. Though shout out to former NWA champion and wrestling legend Terry Funk, who appeared in the Sylvester Stallone movies Paradise Alley and Over the Top.
Mr. Cutler is talking to you.
I'm through talking.
Funk and Stallone were friends, with Stallone having a respect for pro wrestlers. Remember that for later. If you look outside of Hollywood and the US at this time, there's one country where someone could be a top star in wrestling and a top movie star at the same time. El Santo, the most famous luchador in the history of Mexico, appeared in 53 movies between the 60s and 70s. These were essentially B-movies where he'd play a fictionalized version of himself, battling all sorts of supernatural elements. You had Santo versus the zombies, Santo versus the vampire women, Santo versus Frankenstein's daughter. He even teamed up with fellow wrestler Blue Demon to take on Dracula, the Wolfman, Frankenstein, and the creature from the Black Lagoon. A main event anywhere in the world. Anyway, back in the US, In 1983, Vince McMahon Jr. took over the Northeast Territory of the WWF and had plans for national expansion. Stealing the top stars from the other territories, running live events and airing WWF TV in their regions and putting them out of business. Who was going to be the WWF's top star to lead this national expansion? A year earlier in 1982, Sylvester Stallone needed a wrestler for a scene in the movie Rocky III, but he didn't call on his friend Terry Funk. He called on a different Terry Hulk Hogan Bollea.
Thunderlips is here, in the flesh, baby.
Oh my God.
The ultimate male versus the ultimate meatball.
Boy, he is a monster.
This cameo raised Hogan's profile, making him the ideal candidate to become WWF's top national star. McMahon poached Hogan from the Minnesota Territory, made him the WWF champion, and kickstarted a boom period for the company. Hogan became pro wrestling's representative to mainstream culture. He hosted SNL with Rocky III co-star Mr. T, who he also main evented the first WrestleMania with, the WWF's flagship annual event still going to this day. He was the first and to this date only pro wrestler to appear on the cover of Sports Illustrated magazine. He guest starred in the A-Team, he even had his own Saturday morning cartoon. So after becoming a pop culture icon, it seemed natural that the next step for Hogan would be to branch out into movies. I mean, he already had an iconic movie role to his name. Big studio project was the Hulkster going to use to show off his credentials as a leading man? The WWF produced 1989 film, No Holds Barred. It's alleged that Hogan and WWF owner Vince McMahon wrote the script over a weekend in a motel together. And it shows.
What's that smell?
Aside from it being a bad movie, so many things about No Holds Barred make it a strange choice for Hogan. Hogan's wrestling persona was heavily marketed towards children. This is a film with dick jokes and rape attempts. Plus, it being a WWF-produced film with Hogan playing a pro wrestler did little to show that Hogan could be seen as anything other than a pro wrestler. And his performance also made that case as well.
You built bigger walls than I ever could. There's a couch in the lobby that has a better sense of humor than you do.
But hey, John Cena's first few films before making it big were WWE productions, so maybe Hogan's next project with a major studio would be the one to kickstart his movie career. 1991's Suburban Commando was not that. This family comedy saw Hogan playing an intergalactic space warrior stranding on Earth and having to stay in the suburbs with Christopher Lloyd and his family. And it bombed at the box office. So why was this? It's hard to attribute this to one thing, but I don't think people were buying Hogan as a leading man. His acting hadn't improved since No Holds Barred, so this didn't help matters.
Again?
My cat.
Are you sure? Positive?
Hogan thrived when giving an over-the-top bombastic delivery that lent itself to the bombastic, over-the-top world of pro wrestling. But it just didn't sound right when he needed to talk like a normal person.
Let me guess. You're gonna pound my face, break every bone in my body, then you're gonna drag me across the gravel road and feed my remains to a warthog. Is that about right?
Rock, Cena and Bautista, despite their larger-than-life physiques, have been able to showcase a naturalism and moments of vulnerability that allow movie audiences to relate to them. But also, there was a major story in 1991 that possibly played a factor in the public not taking to Hogan as a leading man.
Professional wrestlers have been slammed for many things over the years, with one of the most prominent accusations being that a number of them use steroids to enhance their bodies and build up their muscles beyond normal limits. The latest to be accused has been Hulk Hogan in a trial over a doctor's distribution of steroids.
Dr. George Zahorian, a ringside doctor for the WWF, was found to be distributing steroids to many of the WWF wrestlers. Owner Vince McMahon was implicated, and a 3-year trial ensued that tarnished the image of both the WWF and Hulk Hogan. This was made worse by Hogan appearing on the Arsenio Hall show and flat out denying that he'd used steroids. Yeah.
But the things that I am not is I'm not a steroid abuser, and I do not use steroids.
I myself personally have injected Hulk Hogan with anabolic steroids.
Did the biggest star in pro wrestling get to the top by using dangerous drugs?
So this damage to Hogan's credibility and public image likely hurt his potential acting career, but that didn't stop the Hulk stuff from trying. He stepped away from the WF and pro wrestling just as their popularity started to decline in the early 90s. Okay, makes sense. The Rock's acting career didn't kick off until he left wrestling in the mid-2000s. So what projects did Hogan take on? 1993's Mr. Nanny, which tried following the kindergarten cop formula of big muscle man interacting with kids. 2 years after Kindergarten Cop came out. It bombed. Then there was the TV show Thunder in Paradise, which was cancelled after 1 season. And then there were 3 B movies.
Keep the milk and cookies warm.
The Secret Agent Club, Santa with Muscles, and 3 Ninjas, High Noon at Mega Mountain. The last 2 grossed less than $1 million combined. Side note, Santa with Muscles was produced by Jordan Belfort, the real-life Wolf of Wall Street. At this point, Hogan was in his late 40s. All his films had been critical and commercial disasters. He was experiencing a career renaissance in wrestling, having jumped ship to the WWF's main rival, WCW, and became a bad guy, or turned heel to use pro wrestling terminology. It seemed that Hogan's biggest success came when he was playing Hulk Hogan, and Hogan eventually realised that. Most of his film and TV appearances in later life were cameos where he played himself. He even had his own reality TV series about his family life in the late 2000s, Hogan Knows Best. This lack of versatility is something prevalent in the brief movie career of the only man that can rival Hogan for the title of biggest wrestling star of all time, Stone Cold Steve Austin. All his roles were him playing no-nonsense tough SOBs, similar to his wrestling persona that made him the biggest star of the wrestling boom period of the late 90s. If you look at the careers of The Rock, John Cena and Dave Bautista, they benefited from being able to show they weren't just the meathead tough guys they portrayed in wrestling. They could showcase a sillier side and display more range. It was Cena's appearance in the Judd Apatow comedy Trainwreck in 2015 that got people's attention and showcased his comedic delivery, something he's carried over into subsequent roles. Even The Rock, who's been accused of a lack of range in his roles, is now making an effort to go outside his comfort zone and is taking on more dramatic roles, with The Smashing Machine set to come out later this year. Hell, he's shown range in previous roles like Be Cool and Southland Tales. In later life, Hogan settled into a role as an elder statesman of pro wrestling, coming back for nostalgia runs and enjoying the adulation of the fans. Until he got cancelled for saying the N-word in 2015, and then went down the anti-vaxxer MAGA rabbit hole. But the impressive thing about Hogan's legacy is how well known he is to the general public, and that's just for succeeding in pro wrestling, which even during its boom periods is a niche interest. His death was covered by the likes of the BBC and CNN. He was an icon. One with a complicated legacy, but an icon nonetheless. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe.